As a young child, I grew up in an ethnic household where my mother was illiterate, my father had very little formal education, and English was our second language. At home, we spoke Italian to our parents and siblings until we reached school age. The play space provided by my parents was free with limited resources. However, this did not stop them from providing us with the opportunity to move and learn within our environment. Our interactions were more hands on, such as cooking, group conversations, tinkering with Dad's tools, flicking through picture books, singing, and dancing, all of which had more life based experiences attached to them. The language displayed through these interactions provided social actions which enabled us to communicate, express our feelings, and allowed us to make social connections with each other and context. The stories that were told by my parents about their upbringing during the war, the difficult times they faced through migration, and how they built a new life that provided them with purpose while trying to maintain their cultural identity were sometimes confronting, but they made us understand who we are and what we stood for. It allowed us to connect to place, time, and country as we learned to identify as coming from Tripoli, Libya, but we were Australian born. We were labelled as WOGs, but we were proud of it. Reflecting back on my childhood, my parents taught us skills that we would require later on in life. However, we were given the autonomy to explore and grow within our play space with limited resources and the opportunities that they could provide. Nevertheless, their intentions were to support their children in the reach for intellectual pursuit. This was evident growing up. My mother was illiterate, however, she would sit down on the couch and make up stories to picture books that she would show us, oblivious of the situation at the time. All we could remember was Mum reading stories to us in Italian, stories which she memorised from her own childhood, or basic picture books. The picture books were pictures that she was able to identify and make connections with. To this intentional design and little text, Balcalo 2026, served my mum's purpose to help the child construct and build knowledge and to open conversation. As language is a form of communication, we constantly used it in social settings. For my parents, it was important that we learn to communicate effectively. For my mother, that form of effective communication took place through teaching us skills. The acquisition of knowledge was important to my parents as theirs was very limited. From that, acquiring knowledge of literacy skills was not accomplished through endless alphabet recitation, phonics workshops and worksheets. It was accomplished through inquiry, natural resources, recycled materials, books, and the wanderings of the child, Balcancino. On the other hand, more detailed stories were read to us by our older siblings in English. Growing up, I remember my favourite book, which was read to me by my siblings, was The Monster at the End of This Book by Stone. A little golden book which was bold in text, limited in colour, and allowed the reader to differentiate between sounds. My favourite part was when my sister would change her voice and it went something like this. What did that say on the first page? What did it say? Did it say there'd be a monster at the end of this book? Did it? Oh, I'm so scared of monsters. Shh. Listen, I have an idea. If you don't turn any pages, you'll never get to the end of this book. And that's good, because there's a monster at the end of this book. So please don't turn the page. So the use of the gestures, tones, encourage the listener to tune in. Through these stories, I now begin to understand the significance of communication skills, language acquisition, and deciphering print as goals parents and teachers have for children. An overarching outcome to make meaning out of what is spoken, heard, and read in specific context and the environment view of the child's development, Balcancino. This is synonymous with Vygotski's theory, which suggests that children will grow into intellectual life around them, and that learning and development is what a child could do without help or what they can accomplish with assistance. Balconcino, 2016. Vygotsky identifies the importance of imaginative play as a major influence to cognitive growth. Vygotsky recognizes that when children are free to experiment and explore new possibilities, they are working in their zone of proximal development. They are operating at a little above or beyond their usual capabilities. Ewing, Callow, and Rushton. In comparison, Loris Malaguzzi believed that learning does not move in logical sequence fashion but through starts and stops, jumps, leaps, and retreats, and the journey of education is not to acquire a body of knowledge but rather to question, consider, and challenge boundaries between the mundane and the often trivial requirements of schooling. Balconcino, 2016. Malaguzzi's theory influences the child to discover through ways of knowing, as a child expresses itself through the use of 100 languages. Growing up in the moment in time, we may not have understood the importance of these interactions and how they shape our learning and development, but as we grow, we begin to understand the importance and the significance, the relationship of play, imagination, language development, and the importance of arts in children's learning. Ewing, Callow, and Rushton. The experience helps shape our world and the understandings we have of it. The way we choose to interact in the space helps a child to navigate through the pressures of growing up and to feel a sense of belonging to their social surroundings.